Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen, and today I'm going to show you how to make my favorite hot honey barbecue chicken with citrus slaw salad. This is a really easy recipe, and like the whole dinner comes together really quickly. In fact, what makes the best part of this is that you can prepare most of this earlier on in the day, and then all you have to do is just cook the chicken when it's time for supper. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm going to go ahead and start with the slaw, the citrus slaw portion of this, and that way I can get it dressed and get it in the refrigerator, and it'll just be ready for me when I need it a little later. Now, as always, I will leave you a link down below where I found the original recipe. I did deviate from the chicken recipe and I made my own hot honey barbecue sauce, which I will leave the recipe for that down below. If you are unaware, I cook for a very large family, so I always double my ingredients, but for this recipe, I started by shredding a small to medium-sized green cabbage. Now you can use red cabbage if you prefer. That would make for a very colorful slaw. I don't really think that it would affect the flavor in any way, but just, pick what you have access to. I'm gonna slice a red onion. This one was really large, so I'm only using about half of this red onion, but I'm just gonna try to slice it as thin as I can by hand. Now, anytime I'm making a slaw, or anything with cabbage in it that's going to be served raw, I like to kind of run my hands through it and give it a good squeeze, and it helps sort of break down the cabbage. It will still be crunchy, but this just makes it a little easier to eat and not quite so stiff. And also sitting with the dressing on it is going to help to soften this cabbage up a little bit. So after that, I'm just going to add the red onion directly to the top of this cabbage, and then I'm going to peel up some mandarin oranges. Now, the original recipe calls for 2 navel oranges or just regular oranges, but I had mandarins, so I figured I would go ahead and use those. The next ingredient for your salad is carrots, and you can shred these with like a vegetable grater if you prefer, but I like just running my vegetable peeler down them to make long ribbons. It really adds a nice contrast and texture for your salad. I'm also chopping 1 bunch of cilantro. Now, obviously, if you are one of the soap people, you can totally substitute the cilantro for some flat leaf parsley or something sort of like that. The green in the salad just adds a really nice fresh kick. So you don't have to use cilantro. I know not everybody likes it. I found some sliced almonds at Kroger. Now, normally I would just use whole almonds and slice them myself. In fact, my first plan was to use some wasabi almonds. I thought that would be delicious and then just chop them up. But then I found these sliced ones and figured, well, okay, I'll just use the sliced almonds. They weren't very expensive. So moving on to the dressing, you're going to need about 1/4 a cup of avocado oil or whatever neutral flavored oil you happen to have on hand. You don't have to go buy something special for this. If you like olive oil, just use olive oil. And then I'm going to juice 1 large lime into this oil I have here. If you don't have access to fresh limes or lemons even, you can just use the bottle stuff. That'll work just fine. We're not using the zest of it, we're just using the juice. So I am 100% behind just using whatever you happen to have in your pantry. So if you don't have lime juice, just use lemon juice. I'm also crushing a couple of large garlic cloves into this dressing. Again, if you don't have fresh garlic, I know a lot of folks are waiting till like June or July to harvest their garlic, and you can use garlic powder. That will work just fine. I'm adding a couple tablespoons of some honey to this to add a little bit of sweetness. And then I'm going to salt and pepper this to taste. And I'm going to mix this really well with a whisk. Now, it's not going to really emulsify because I didn't add any mustard or anything like that to it. But it does come together really nicely, this dressing. And even though it sat in my refrigerator for several hours before I was ready for supper, it didn't really separate. Once it was on the salad, it stayed together. So just give it a really good whisk, or if you're making this like in a mason jar, just, shake it really well until it starts to come together, and then just pour it right over your salad. Now, I think if you were going to take this to a party or something and you wanted the vegetables to be more crisp and not quite so broken down by the acid, you could just store your dressing in another bowl and dress the salad right before you were ready to serve it. But I wanted that cabbage to kind of break down a little bit, and I wanted the dressing to soak in. So I just added it straight in, and I made sure I mixed it up really well so that everything was incorporated. I put a lid on it and I stuck it straight into the refrigerator. And I'm also going to go ahead and get my barbecue sauce ready in advance. The longer this sauce sits, the more it thickens up as it cools off. So I wanted to make sure I gave this sauce plenty of time to get cooled off before I was ready to put it onto the chicken. So for the sauce, I'm just going to use a small saucepan that has a lid, and I'm going to add 1 cup of white vinegar. If you prefer apple cider vinegar, you can totally use that here. And I know you can see just a little bit of oil floating on the top of that vinegar. That is because I used the same measuring cup that I used for my avocado oil. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm also adding a cup of ketchup. I almost used my sugar-free ketchup for this, but I thought, it's not that much when you think about the bigger picture. So I just used regular ketchup. But if you are watching your sugar intake, you can totally use like the G Hughes stuff. I also added a splash of liquid smoke. Be very careful. That stuff is potent and a little goes a long way. And now I'm seasoning it with some garlic powder and onion powder. As I said, I'll leave you the measurements down below. And because this recipe calls for hot honey, I couldn't find any hot honey, so I'm just going to use regular honey, and I'm adding some cayenne pepper to this. You can control the level of heat if you add the heat yourself. When you buy hot honey from the store, you're kind of at the mercy of the person that made it. It may be hotter than you like it to be. So for me, I just added like a healthy teaspoon of cayenne powder, and it was perfect. It was like sweet heat. Now in my measuring cup, I have a cup of honey, and I'm also adding a 1/2 cup of Blackstrap molasses to this. If you don't have just straight up molasses, you can substitute the molasses for just a little bit of brown sugar, and that'll kind of accomplish the same thing. And now that I have pretty much everything in here, the only thing left for me to do is to scrape all this goodness out of this measuring cup, and then I'm going to salt and pepper this to taste. Optionally, if you wanted to, you could add a little red pepper flake here too for some more heat. I'm going to set this to medium high, and I'm going to mix this up really well so that everything dissolves and mixes together. And I'm going to bring this up to a pretty heavy simmer. And I'm not going to walk away from this because the amount of sugar that is in this will burn. I'm just going to keep an eye on it, and I'm going to whisk it, and I'm going to let it bubble furiously until it has reduced by about half, and it kind of sticks to a metal spoon when I dip it in. Now, if you wanted to let this go a little longer to make it thicker, that would be absolutely fine. But for me, I'm going to be brushing this on my chicken, and this was perfect. So I'm just going to turn the heat off. I'm going to put a lid on this, and I'm going to let it sit on that back burner and cool off until I am ready to cook my chicken. Now, originally, I was going to grill this with you guys, but my grill, which is a hand-me-down from a friend and about 15 years old, finally decided it had had enough. It's a propane grill, and the bottom is kind of rusted out, and it just will not hold fire anymore. So, next best thing is to make this in the oven, and it's probably more handy to just show me making this in the oven because not everybody has a grill. But if you have a charcoal grill or a propane grill, by all means, grill this chicken. It is 1000% better. But for me, we're just gonna have to settle on the oven today. So I'm using chicken thighs because they were the cheapest thing at the grocery store when I went to look. And this is just some smoked paprika and some garlic powder and onion powder and salt and pepper. And I'm just going to mix it together really well. And then I'm going to season this chicken liberally with this. It's going to seem like I am putting a ton on this. It needs to have a ton. Chicken itself doesn't have a lot of flavor. And while we are going to put that delicious sauce on here, I want the meat to have some, flavor actually to the meat and not just laying on top of it. So season the top and the bottom really heavily, and I'm going to rub it in a little bit. And then I'm popping this into the oven at 400, and I'm going to let it go for about 15 or 20 minutes. And I'm going to take it out, flip it over, and start basting my chicken. If you are doing this on the grill, you want to give your chicken a little bit of grill time for that skin to sort of tighten up, for the outside of it to get a little bit more firm before you start basting your chicken with the barbecue sauce, because it 1000% will catch on fire and burn. So let your chicken cook a little bit before you start to baste it. And this is what it looked like after about the first 15 or 20 minutes at 400 degrees. So I'm just going to flip all of these over, and then I'm going to use my little baster brush, and I'm going to hit all of this chicken with a really decent layer of that barbecue sauce that we made. And I'm going to put it back in the oven for about another 20 minutes. And I'm going to pull it out and flip it, rinse and repeat until the chicken's core temperature is 165 degrees. You definitely want to use your meat thermometer. It's very hard to tell with a chicken that has had, 5 layers of barbecue sauce painted on it to see if it's done or not. So stick your thermometer in there. It should read 165 degrees, and then you'll know that your chicken is finished. And as you're doing this, each time you paint a new layer on your chicken and flip it over, that it's going to get thicker and thicker. So by the end, it just has like this crazy amount of barbecue sauce built up on it, and it really is delicious. So let me show you how I plated this up for my husband. I gave him a generous amount of that delicious citrus slaw, and I can't even tell you, when I took the lid off of that salad and went to mix it up again, it smelled so delightful. You could smell the lime, you could smell the cilantro and the oranges, and it was just amazing. And everybody, all of my kids, enjoyed this. It was just so refreshing, and the nice little hit of sweetness in there from those mandarin oranges was delightful. So I'm just going to put a couple pieces of this chicken on this plate for my husband. And this stuff is so sticky that it was sticking to my tongs and just leaving like big indentions in the barbecue sauce. So don't skip on that sauce. I really hope that you guys give this a try, whether you do it in the oven or on the grill. And if you do, leave me a comment and let me know what your family thought about this hot honey barbecue chicken. What did you do differently? Did you change anything in this recipe to suit your tastes better? Leave me a comment and let me know. And until next time, friends, happy cooking.